information with you, and then we're going to hear from AHS on the 938. This is the homeless response. All right, so we are back live. This is Senate Health and Welfare. Sounds like there's a crowd out there. I thought we just wanted this room, but it's not. Sorry. No, you're okay.
Plus, it's just not letting me in.
Oh, pictures.
We had this problem the other day. Oh, here it goes. There it goes. Ooh, slow. Okay.
This chair is so much better than all of them.
Says you. You don't have to sit there. You don't have to push it on.
Do you like the other one better?
I like armrests.
I know the armrests are.
I'm all about armrests. But hey, Senator Morley wants me to do it more uncomfortable. Happy to.
We're getting that. We're not getting that threatening to collapse fund. He's being very.
I like it, I think. Like my legs, they're. For the record, are we live?
We are.
Oh, okay. For the record, Noel Langwell, the Joint Fiscal Office. I'm going to put up a fiscal note, and then really what I'm going to do is just more orient you to sort of what's in it. I'm not going to go through it. I'm not going to go through every appropriation because Katie already did that. But it's really meant to orient you on the relationship of this to the budget. So let me find Zoom.
Oh, sorry, I did not go through the expenditures yesterday.
Oh, okay.
I skipped over that.
That's right. Okay, then I will briefly. I'll pretend I will channel the clerk of the house and speak very fast during a roll call. Okay, so the first thing I just want to flag is that the bill, the budget, the governor's recommended budget included $82.6 million, $82,634,153 to be very specific, for the purposes of homelessness. Their initiative, how they laid out in the governor's budget. I know the commissioners here will talk more about that, or can answer your questions about that. What 938 does is it says we're going to operate within that budget, but we're going to rethink how that money is spent. That is ultimately what the goal does, or what the bill does. But to be even more specific, there's a chart here, and what the Human Services Committee in the House tried to do is make sure that the initiative that they did fit into the buckets that the governor had. So for instance, it's a mix of one-time base, federal funds, global commitments. And if you move things around, like then it changes the numbers. For instance, you might say, we want to use federal funds. Well, we can't use federal funds for this because the federal funds are very specific for that. Or they might say, well, global commitment, it has to be global commitment eligible. So if you do something that isn't global commitment eligible, then you're going to lose the federal match on it. So they're really very deliberative to make sure that their initiatives fit within those boxes. Otherwise, it changes the funding. If that makes sense? So with that said, you can see, there's 15. Well, I'm not going to walk through this particular chart. This really is meant to orient you, and it also breaks it out by sections of the budget. So, for instance, you have section B1100 and section, and there's two. So, section B1100 in the budget are one-time funds, and so there's one-time funds for general assistance, and there's one-time funds through shelter funding. That's how it is laid out to the budget. So, you're not going to see like, in the budget, it's not going to be like $18 million goes to this. It's going to be broken out into those sections. And that's sort of how the budget works. Then you can see there's base. So there's spread out. All three of these, B6, 316, 321, and 325 are all sections in DCF. But there's different departments. So you have Economic Services Division, you have General Assistance, and you have Office of OEM, right? So that's, So again, the human services and the house tried to operate within that column. Now that said, I'll move on to, and then so what I have here, the next chart, which is in the bottom, this is how that was broken up. So you can see there's HOP operation grants, and it ties this section in the budget too, so that it matches this particular chart will match to the section of the budget. So there's $39.3 million for HOP grant operations. And again, you can see it's broken out between base general fund,
Is it 39, 38?
39.3, if you look at
Okay,
the far right. So 38.3 is base GF. Yep, 800,000 for federal funds, 200,000 for global commitments, right? So, and this is in millions, so if it's 38, 30 million, if it's 0.8, it's 800,000. There's the dollar cents. So you have 4.4 in shelter development. And again, I'm not going to talk, it's laid out in the fund. I'm just going to lay out the overall. So 4.4 million for shelter development. There's 23.9 million for the emergency housing in hotels and motels. There's 2.4 million for case management. There's 4.2 million for permanent supportive housing and family supportive housing. There's 3 million for rental assistance. There's 500,000 for grants to municipalities. There's 1.5 million for emergency cold weather shelters. There's 300,000 for quote unquote other expenses, other things that they might need to implement the program. And then there's 3.2 million for staffing, grants, and contracts. Now, the last thing I'll talk about in this chart is that there is a language in there that says that the bill directs that any funds appropriated for the General Assistance Emergency Housing or the Housing Opportunity Grant HOP program that remain unspent at the end of fiscal year 26 be carried forward for investments going forward into the Vermont responsible for fiscal year 27. So any money that's not spent in this fiscal year will be carried forward because oftentimes that money is carried forward or scooped up for other points. So they're trying to make some point that they want this money to stay in the program. So that's the first charts. I have another chart. And I'll tell you what it is, and then I can answer questions that is posted. And I have hard copies because this is, again, one of those things that's often easier to just have it in your hand. Thank you. So I'll just understand you. Thank you. So what this is, and maybe I'm preempting the commissioner, but this might be helpful.
This is good.
This is meant to be sort of a comparison of the spending between what's in this bill and the GovRec. So let me pull it up real quick on the sheet that I'll orient you to.
We have this on our webpage.
I did send it, yes. So, so what this is meant to do, and it's a lot of numbers, I know, but it's really meant to be a comparison so that when the commissioner gets up and says, well, we recommended money be spent this way or that way, you can look at this chart and say, here is the difference in what we're with. So you have it says amendments, that's because it did it when still in the House, it should say the House bill, bad labeling. And then you have the GovRec, and then the delta. The delta is the difference between the two. So for instance, you can see that House spent 39.3, GovRec is 41.5, and there's a delta of negative 2.2. So it's relative to the House bill. And this is where you can see the big differences in between the two. But the piece that I want to reemphasize, if you look at that bottom line, you can see all the bolded, the numbers match. So that's the goal they were trying to get to. So that it'd be say 56.7 for base GF, 21.2 for one-time GF, et cetera, et cetera. So the bottom matches, but the numbers above, how much goes to each different programs is changing. So it really meant that I just want to orient you to this so that when the commissioner gets up and talks about what their proposal was, you can have a silence. Any questions? Sure.
No, over the last year, I'm most concerned about the one-time general fund. Last year's one-time general fund, what was it?
I don't recall.
Was it over 21 million?
Oh, yeah, I think so. But, throw a line with Brent.
Yeah, man, it's on a Fred.
For the record, Mr. McClure, Deputy Secretary, Agency of Human Services. So last year, and only fact check me on it, the GA Hotel Motel one-time funding was total funding was 30 million. And of that, 8.5 is base, so a total of 38.
Yeah, I was just looking at, so what I think Nolan's showing here is you've got the base general fund in place. And then it's a one-time general fund. So we're continuing. So I like the base, right? It's the one-time general fund. Is that growing or decreasing over time? And then your total 82.6 million, is that down or higher than last year?
So the total, that 21.6 million, we're looking at that line, that's a decrease year over year. So last year that line was 38.5.
Okay, the one time.
The total, which includes both the one time and base. The GA Hotel Motel.
And also, it's kind of hard to measure apples to apples because
Yeah.
last year it was just hotel motel.
Yeah.
And
See, I
this
didn't know
year,
that.
and this year, what they're doing is they're saying, we want to exit that. We want to start creating a program that actually addresses the problem and isn't abandoning. So this is a very
Okay,
different.
so, okay,
So the reframe of the question might be, how much did they spend on hotel motels last year and how much do they plan to spend on hotel motels this year and going forward? I don't know the answer to that either, but ultimately that's kind of the goal, is for that number to start going down, and for services, case management, rentals, those kind of things to sort of help people move out of homelessness. So this is a new program to try to solve the problems that were not.
so it's an $82 million problem, and I can't remember, you guys said how many people were homeless and how many were children?
4,000.
4,000 total, of which 700, 800 were children. So 4,000 divided by 82.
Well, you can't actually do that because you also have services there. So some require services and some don't, and you've got administrative costs, all that.
Okay,
So as we go through the bill, 938, and look at how this fits into that,
Yeah.
that'll answer
Okay.
some of your questions.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, this bill, the purpose of this bill, and I won't speak for the members of the committee, but was to try to solve a problem.
Yep, no, that's what all bills do, I thought.
Yeah.
Holy stuff.
No comment? I just-
Create problems. We should have this meeting. Oh,
I just work here just the facts.
is there anything else you'd like to ask Nolan at this point? I mean, he'll be here with us. He's our joint fiscal officer.
Thank you.
All right. So we're going to bring up, Christian McClure, Deputy Secretary for AHS, and, listen to your testimony on the bill. It'd be helpful.
Great, thank you. For the record, Ms. McClure again, Deputy Secretary, Agency of Human Services.
And here's what I'm going to suggest for my committee. You're going to have 1,000 questions. Let's go through the testimony. If there's something you critically do not understand, then raise your hand. Other than that, getting into comments and broader discussion will only slow us down. It's too much. So
Thank you, Madam
go
Chair.
ahead.
And thank you, committee, for working on this really important bill. You work towards that. So as an agency, we're generally supportive of much of what's included in the bill, but there are some areas we would like to see refinements, improvements. So I'll take you through a high-level overview of them and then hand it off to the commissioner, and she'll speak in more detail about them. One of the things we wanted to share with the committee before we really dive into the details is to talk and share with you how we've been working as an agency to address homelessness and how we have been working as an agency with this bill. So we see homelessness as a topic that really transcends health and human services across the spectrum. So we have really approached the work as a one agency perspective. So that means all departments are at the table with us. So Dale, the Department of Disabilities, Aging and Independent Living, DMH, our Department of Mental Health, DDH, our Department of Health with their substance use division. We really all work as one team across the agency. And we're really committed to working with the committee collaboratively, again, across the agency. We thought we would share our vision for the bill and the goals that we see around it. So we see this as an opportunity to invest in resources for better outcomes for Vermonters and communities in a sustainable way. And we also see it as a multi-year transition, which is included in the bill. Again, enhancing shelter development, very committed to shelter development, enhancing services in shelters and case management. While we see enhancements there, much like you're speaking to, we also would like to see a reduction in things that aren't working as well, such as hotel motel. So we see the goal is to create a really cohesive system or continuum of care as referenced in the bill that invests in resources that are effective and provide people the services they need with the accountability around them. And when we speak about accountability, we see it in a few different areas. Accountability for the Vermonters engaging in the system, accountability for the community partners, and accountability for the state. So we see accountability across the whole spectrum. So when we think about what are we transitioning to, again, we really would like to see further development in our shelter system. We think this overall, the shelter system was working really well. So want to continue to develop that and enhance that. You'll see some investments from the commissioner around shelters for children with families, shelters for those in recovery, and also shelters for the medically vulnerable. So again, it's a stronger integration of services in the shelter, bringing in case management, mental health services, healthcare services, substance use services, all within the shelter to support Vermonters. And you'll also see clear and more effective pathways to permanent housing. So this includes both preventative services and some financial supports. We talked a little bit about accountability, and I just want to kind of underscore that. We do think it's really important to have accountability within the bill. So clear expectations and eligibility standards to ensure assistance is really getting to those who have no other safe alternative. And we think it's really important to pair that shelter with meaningful engagements and supports. And like I said, hold all the entities accountable, including partners, as well as the state running them. As I mentioned, there are a few priority adjustments or amendments that we would like to see in the bill to ensure that policy is clear, workable, and consistent for oversight. So there are three of them that I'm going to talk about again. The commissioner will talk in more detail. The first one is the Human Services Board Authority. This section raises many legal, programmatic, policy, and logistical concerns. So we recommend removing this section entirely. We have also submitted a legislative report with recommendations around the Human Services Board, and we can certainly provide that to the committee if that's helpful. In an effort to reduce some of the HSB cases that we do see, we would really like clarity in the bill. So we do very much want to follow the law, and having clarity of that is very important for us. The second item is around prioritization and eligibility. So there's prioritization across the continuum of care in the bill. We recommend replacing that and including eligibility instead for the hotel motel section. Again, we see the shelter system working really well, and there's some defined shelters, children, families, recovery, that we don't think the prioritization applies as much in those specific cases. But eligibility for hotel motel we see as important in that space. The third one is around emergency cold weather shelters. So I'm going to do a little bit of background because we approached it a little differently this past year. So the temperature threshold used to be, it feels like 20 when the emergency cold weather shelters would open. That is very cold. We increased that threshold to feels like 0 degrees as an optional opening, and then a required opening at -10. The second key item we did differently this year is we partnered with VIA, Vermont Interfaith Action, and they've been great partners. They work directly with communities. And as a result, there have been 6 different emergency cold weather shelters that have opened, and that's a 3-fold increase year to year. So good geographic dispersion as well. Those shelters were open for 34 nights across the winter, a mix of mandatory and optional opening. So we would encourage the committee to hear from VIA on their experience and thoughts around the bill. And one of the items, going back to the budget here, is we would like to see this good work continue. So in the governor's recommended budget, you can see we had it in base. So we would like to continue this good work year to year. And to keep it balanced would offset that shelter development that's in base in one-time funding instead. So in conclusion, again, thank you very much for your hard work on this bill. We've identified some technical items as well as some of these broader issues that I mentioned, and the commission will speak more about. And we think that'll be helpful if those could be considered for the bill. We can also provide some recommended language if that's helpful. And just want to reiterate, our goal is to create a system that's responsive to Vermonters experiencing homelessness, a system that's accountable and sustainable.
Thank you. Questions? So just to offer clarity to what you just said, the 3 areas that you're talking about, the human resources board, the human services board, authority, and you want to strike that whole section. You understand that, but then there's also a report that we can look at. And to add clarity to that. So you also said something about adding clarity to that section of the bill. So
Adding clarity.
add clarity to it by taking it out.
2 things. One, we would like it removed, and we're currently experiencing a high number of human service board cases, which stems from, in our opinion, a lack of clarity with the existing law. So we would like whatever becomes law to be very clear so we can.
Understood. Okay, that helps. And then the second one was, rather than using prioritization, using eligibility for the different types of shelters or housing that is defined within the bill.
Eligibility for the hotel motel.
Only for the hotel motel.
Correct.
Got it.
Because shelters have some specific
Specific identities. So, okay. Understood. And then the emergency cold weather piece. Okay. Go ahead.
One question, and you know, if you're changing the system, and I didn't hear you say, but I think as I looked at the bill, one of the goals is helping people move out of homelessness to finding permanent shelter. And I just want to make sure that is one of really an emphasis in what we're trying to do, and not continue to have to deal with the same people for the next 30 years. Some people that may never get off of it, but we really want to try to help people get to a point where they have permanent housing.
That's correct. Absolutely.
Go ahead.
I have a general comment that I brought up yesterday. I'll bring it up again today, just around accountability, which I think is a great thing. I like to be held accountable. But I worry that a lot of the folks who are in the system lack the executive functioning skills, let's say, to be held accountable with certain benchmarks that are required in the bill. I just was wondering if you could just generally speak to that. I worry it'll be a barrier for some people.
Well, our perspective and hearing from shelter providers, it's really important for folks to work towards a goal. And that goal can be different for different people. So we really would like to see required engagement for case management. So having people work to a goal to help improve their outcome for a long-term permanent housing situation. And again, that goal can be different for different people.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Yes.
Very good, helpful. So now we'll get more detail from the commissioner. Thank you for being here. Hi. And I would just say FYI for folks who are coming in to testify, so those at the commissioner level and others who haven't confirmed as yet, is we haven't received a letter from the governor to begin the confirmation process. But I've been trying to get that information so that we can do that. One figure.
But I'm still legit.
We're gonna find out.
All right, here we go.
Thank you for being here.
Okay, Sandy Hoffman, Commissioner for Department of Children and Families. So I want to reiterate what Kristen was saying about the collaboration. So this group and the group from House Human Services have been great in looking into the issue and not just treating it with a Band-Aid, really looking at how we can reform the system. And it's exciting to be a part of the conversation and for having such willing partners in it. So we appreciate that. So now we'll move on to what we don't like.
It's okay, that's why you're here.
We'll start.
We need to hear all from everyone about as many people as we can, given our time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we do believe there is significant alignment with the proposal and the administration's proposal, such as the dollar amount matching and addressing necessary services for unhoused Vermonters and supporting the creation of specialty shelters. So that's addressing the long-term needs so that they don't go back into homelessness once they're out. And I wanted to share some of the internal progress and updates that we've been doing within the department and the agency. So we have been working toward improving the system by investing in diverse shelter options like the recovery shelter and developing a proposal to address the population that was identified by a working group that was exploring the current system challenges and other shelter development. We're also taking a methodical approach to identify needs of specific groups within the homeless population through the development of an initial assessment tool by the DCF clinical director, and we'll talk more about that later on. And we're in the process of developing a strategic plan with timelines and potential.
We lost the connection.
I'm back.
All right,
Give me 1 second.
all right, good. Don't want to miss it. But we don't have it yet on our webpage.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm gonna share it again. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Do you want me to hold? So that comes up? Okay.
It's up to you.
We're also in the process of developing a strategic plan with timelines and potential metrics for assessing progress. So this is all work that we started back in like October, November, identifying that there needed to be system changes regardless of what happened here. Of course, what happens here is going to determine what we do moving forward, but we are making progress internally.
Sorry, I'm having internet issues, so I apologize.
Yeah, this room sometimes does that. Yeah, this. All right, keep going.
So I'll just hold it up. So despite broad alignment, there are still several areas of the bill that are unworkable for the department as written, and that's Deputy Secretary McClure went through some of them, but I'll get into a little bit more detail, and I'm assuming you'll have questions about it. So one significant challenge is the assignment of the entire administration of the program to OEO. The current OEO, Office of Economic Opportunity Infrastructure, is not in a position to absorb these functions. We believe it is a DCF function to figure out how, based on resources, et cetera. And we're not sure of the purpose, and I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze. Trying to move everyone over, it just is it's not a good use of resources.
Let
And
me
then
ask this question as you're going through, were these items that were brought up during the discussion in the House, or was it simply the decision was made and?
no, some of the things that were done in the House were done through the budget, the allocation of where the money went, and we didn't see that to the end, so we couldn't really get a full picture of what was going to be coming through. So there was some moving of positions and elimination of others, and we need them where they are to implement the program as it was designed in the GovRec.
I keep getting kicked out of the Zoom room. I apologize.
So just to reiterate, that was, you're going through a list of issues and that was the first one.
Yeah, the first one was
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
moving everything to OEO. And we would recommend leaving the administrative decisions at the department level and reinstating the positions to manage eligibility, administration, and the proposed hotel motel staffing. In our model, we had people at the hotel motel, so we were envisioning hotel motels like maybe being designated as a family hotel. And in that hotel, there would be a staff person to ensure there was coordination of services. So those positions were eliminated. And then the funding allocation, there's been some conversation about that, and this is where the bucketing matters. So the total amount of money aligns, but it was moved around. The administration prefers to fund the shelter development with one-time funds, as that's the nature of development. What is appropriated in the development in 938 is insufficient to address shelter needs in the state. We also think the emergency cold weather shelter program should be in base, as the program has wide support and will likely continue. And permanent supportive housing was also cut. And when I asked what the impact of that was, I was told 13 families would be unable to access the services. So that would impact 13 families, the cut that's in there. Okay, and then eligibility and prioritization. So the H 938 institutes broad eligibility and prioritization criteria for all service levels of the proposed continuum. And this is where we see some challenges with the model as a continuum, and that a person, the way it's designed is if a person can be can't be served at level 2, then they go to 2B or something like that, or then 3. So it's all, we think that we should do an initial assessment that determines where they're placed based on the need of the person. So not necessarily having to fail out of the others. There are just some instances where a different placement makes more sense, like someone might not do well in a congregate setting. So we wouldn't want to place them there because I think then you're setting them up for failure. That's the initial assessment and placement decisions that I talked about. The clinical tool that our director was developing was to enable us to assess when they come in what the needs are and where they should be placed. And then we would like to be able to use the hotel motel program when it makes sense. So if someone doesn't do well in a congregate setting, we want to be able to use this tool to justify the movement. So we would like some flexibility in how it's administered, but always using the hotel motel as the last resort. So then the prioritization criteria that's in the bill, we almost want to use as eligibility criteria for the hotel motel program, but the rest of the system shouldn't have that prioritization criteria. Oh, and then okay. A number of definitions lack clarity and could lead to inconsistency. And this is what Deputy Secretary McClure was talking about. We would like the clarity in the definitions. So there's no ambiguity and we don't end up in a battle over what the right interpretation is. And then we have gone through and we have shared proposed definitions with Legislative Council. And then the Human Services Board, again, we think it authorizes extreme overreach of the HSB. It forces policy and practice for the department and partners after 20 identical decisions. There are additional impacts, so we think that whole section should be, that it needs to strike that section. I don't know how to say struck. It needs to be struck. And right now, AHS is upstairs discussing broader HSB reforms, and we recommend that those conversations happen there and not in this middle.
Where are they happening?
How's Human Services right now?
Oh, okay. And within the context of which bill, or just happened? It just happened.
Okay.
Okay,
So that's what we have.
that's it.
That's it. I can answer questions. I can give you the design as I can tell you how we're envisioning it looking.
First, we got a question for Simon Gulick.
Thank you. Thank you for that testimony. I was wondering, and you sort of alluded to it, but it seems like where folks are put in the continuum is really important. So I was wondering what the intake protocol is for people.
Right now, we have a clinical director at DCF that is working with the team that does the administers the program. And they're identifying what they need in order to make a determination on what placement makes the most sense. So currently, there's not really a system. It's first come, first serve, and there's whatever room is available, the closest or whatever to where the person lives. We would like to be more methodical in the approach and fit people where it makes sense.
I think you were here yesterday, so you heard what my question was going to be. I was just curious up in the Northeast Kingdom, whether or not we're gonna be able to actually add beds and, whether or not you got the services available up in the Northeast Kingdom, for these individuals.
So one of the challenges with the bill is that this gets implemented right away. We already are sending out our NOFOs for grants for this coming year, so we wouldn't be able to implement quickly. What we envision is creating a culture in which the communities work with the agencies, work together within the communities to identify what it is that they need and submit a grant together or something that's complementary, so they're addressing what the community needs. There are services available up there. Do they need to be enhanced? Perhaps, but that's what the grant application process would allow for. And the idea is not to build more beds so that you can fit more people. It's move them through the system quicker and get them into the permanent housing with the services that they need to keep them there.
So that does raise the issue about the work that's going on with affordable housing and others. And so I'm not totally fluent with the bill yet, but what, if anything, is in the bill that brings you and the housing process together?
I would love to phone a friend. Nellie has been working on this stuff in the commissioner's office. Would you feel comfortable talking about the work that's happening with the BSHA or it's not really
Not ready yet?
It's not really ready.
not ready for prime time.
But it does make sense if we're doing a systematic improvement overall, then to have some bridge to the affordable housing world. I know that, not to bring up Section 8, but there's all of those issues that are embedded, but having some link would be helpful. Maybe you can think about that.
I know that we are working with our partners across the state, but some of it is just out of our purview.
Yes, I know it is. But you also know where the needs are and you know what the gaps are. And that's part of the whole strategic plan stuff that's going on. So we don't want to get too far afield, but it would be helpful. Link it out. Any other questions? So, help me understand. You're asking to have an some administrative oversight for DCF generally, not simply OEO. So it's more combined within the organization.
Yeah, we will figure out how to implement these.
Sort out the administrative process. And let me ask you this question. Will you engage community partners in doing that?
Absolutely.
I know that's going to be a common.
And we did, and we worked with folks, community partners, to identify what it was they felt that they needed. And our plan is based on feedback from providers. So we have meetings with them regularly to discuss how we can support each other.
And then the second thing was moving the cold weather funding into base funding.
Mhm.
And how much of the cold weather fund, how are we gonna calculate that? We're gonna do it based on number of days over the past 3 years, or is that, or we simply taking the money that's here
Yeah,
and putting it in as base funding?
yes,
Which is that right?
1.3.
And then the other one is on establishing a distinction between eligibility for hotel motel and then prioritization for others, and making sure that people are interviewed once to begin the process and don't have to fail at the one level to move on through.
Right.
Okay, and then you have language that, or suggested changes that, please share with us.
Will do.
Okay. Any other questions? I know this is gonna be this is just the beginning. This is the tip of a huge iceberg. I understand that. I know there are a lot of sections of the bill that you will want to touch with and make changes based on your interests. We get that. And so we're going to take some testimony from folks, not everyone, but some folks who have testified upstairs, so we could get a sense of where we are. And then we'll begin markup, and we're going to begin markup pretty quickly on the bill. It's an important bill, and I know how hard everyone has worked on it. That.
Great.
Any other questions for the commissioner? All right.
Thank you.
You maybe talk with your boss about getting us the letters that can begin confirmation. With contact information.
Time.
Committee, I'm going to suggest a 7-minute break.
Wow.